Angeles Incorporated. Portion.
Today on Seculo, as the world prepares to sit down once again with Iran, will the Biden administration allow the Iranian Islamic Republic to have a nuclear weapon? We'll talk about that with former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo.
Keeping you informed and engaged, now more than ever. This is Seculo.
One thing that's clear is that the Biden administration is spending a lot of time trying to figure out who exactly is calling the shots in Iran right now on the nuclear file. Is it President Raisi? Is it the Supreme National Security Council? What role is the Revolutionary Guards playing, etc.?
We want to hear from you. Share and post your comments or call 1-800-684-3110.
In his most recent report to the IAEA board, Director General Grossi told them there are sites in Iran where we have found the Iranians had nuclear material. They didn't declare it to the international community. They moved it, and now we don't know where it is.
And now your host, Jordan Seculo.
Welcome to Seculo. We're taking your phone calls to 1-800-684-3110 if you want to talk to us on air. That's 1-800-684-3110. We're tracking two things right now. Obviously, we've got more information on these Iran talks, which are starting next month, which, it's probably towards the end of next month. They haven't released the schedule yet. But what we know is that the U.S. is not technically going to be a part of that because we withdrew from the group behind the JCPOA, or the Iran nuclear deal. But Iran wants to move forward. So, again, we will be analyzing this. We're going to be talking to former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo in the next segment of the broadcast, as well as our team, to get a handle on this. But we're also tracking, of course, the infrastructure push that started this morning with the push on a potential vote today. President Biden is addressing the nation as we speak. I want to go to some of that right now. We're going to break all that down for you, too, in the broadcast with Dan Bennett, Washington, D.C. But let's go to President Biden.
35% of rural America that goes without it right now. This pandemic has made it clear the need for affordable and available high-speed internet. The idea of a parent having to put their kids in a car for virtual learning, drive and sit in a McDonald's parking lot so the child can access the internet when school is taught virtually is not only unnecessary, it's just wrong. It's wrong. As I said before, these plans are fiscally responsible. They are fully paid for. They don't add a single penny to the deficit.
So I'm going to jump back in. When they talk infrastructure here, they are talking about the $1.7 trillion plan. This is not the again, $3 trillion yet. It's so that would come through reconciliation. So what are we already seeing? While this speech is occurring, it appears that the president has already started losing votes. Now, the question is, there were Republicans who supported this the first time through in the Senate. If they still hold, you could lose a Bernie Sanders type who said he doesn't support this, and potentially still get this passed. The House is a different question. There's 55 members of the Progressive Caucus now. AOC and Ilhan Omar, they've already said no. They've come out during the speech and say, no, we're not ready to go on this. Nancy Pelosi's line on this was, while the American people probably don't understand a lot about what's in this package, they do like it, and they will like it. And you hear the president, he's talking about things like the internet. That's the kind of infrastructure that we talk about, real infrastructure, whether it's the internet, whether it's roads, bridges, things like that do keep us ahead of the curve. And I think that's something that would be totally bipartisan. It wouldn't be $1.7 trillion, but this is the actual infrastructure bill we're talking about. The question is how they handle that additional $3 trillion through reconciliation. And they're saying today, right now, we want to vote on this today. On at least the $1.7 trillion, and the president. The way that they reported this, that President Biden told members of Congress that his presidency hangs in the balance on this vote. He's about to go to Europe to attend a G20 summit on climate change, and wants some kind of legislative victory to be occurring back at home. The question is, which we're going to monitor very closely, is does this have the votes, and have they explained this clearly enough to the American people? I'd like to hear your thoughts on that too. 1-800-684-3110. That's 1-800-684-3110. When we get back, we're going to jump right into it with former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo on Iran, on some of this gain-of-function research, and Fauci. So again, share this with your friends and family if you're watching online. We'll be right back. 1 second.
There's one box that you'd run back into your burning house to grab. It's the box filled with your videotapes, film reels, and photos. Those sentimental, meaningful, irreplaceable moments. Hi, I'm Nick Mako. And I'm Adam Baselogger. We started the Legacy Box over a decade ago so that we could help families save their memories from being destroyed by floods or fires. And it's not just natural disasters, Adam. Every day, videotapes and photos are slowly fading away, decaying, neglected in closets and attics. Digitizing your old media stops fading, and preserving those recordings means they are safe forever. It's like magic, converting your shoebox of memories into digital files, ready to watch and share. It's the only way to ensure your legacy is safe for generations. That's why over 1 million families have already trusted Legacy Box. Legacy Box is simple and easy, it works, and is safe. We'd love to preserve your family's collection. Don't wait, the risk is too great. Visit legacybox.com/LBox to save 40%. That's legacybox.com/LBox to get started and save. legacybox.com/LBox.
The challenges facing Americans are substantial at a time when our values, our freedoms, our constitutional rights are under attack. It's more important than ever to stand with the American Center for Law and Justice. For decades now, the ACLJ has been on the front lines, protecting your freedoms, defending your rights, in courts, in Congress, and in the public arena. And we have an exceptional track record of success. But here's the bottom line. We could not do our work without your support. We remain committed to protecting your religious and constitutional freedoms. That remains our top priority, especially now during these challenging times. The American Center for Law and Justice is on your side. If you're already a member, thank you. And if you're not, well, this is the perfect time to stand with us at aclj.org, where you can learn more about our life-changing work. Become a member today, aclj.org.
We are going to start taking your calls. The next segment of the broadcast, 1-800-684-3110. You can start getting those in now. We are joined right now by former Secretary of State and Senior Counsel for Global Affairs at the ACLJ, Secretary Mike Pompeo. Secretary Pompeo, let me jump right off because we've got a lot of news going on today, but one of the kind of a breaking news international item that came about yesterday is that Iran is going to rejoin the nuclear talks with the remaining members of the P5+1 that put together this deal that won't be, the U.S. won't be directly involved. You said America will be less secure if we go back into this deal. Now that they're trying to move forward, even maybe without the United States, my first question to you is, what do you think the Biden administration does to go get ahead of this? Because it seemed like to me the world is saying, well, and this kind of looking at how America's wielding its power around the world, saying, well, we don't have to wait for the Americans anymore. We can move forward with a plan like this. Secondhand, though, I'm also concerned about what we might be willing to give up just to get back into these discussions.
Well, Jordan, it does appear that they're trying to move on. When they tried to do that during the Trump administration, we put enormous sanctions on them. We made sure that the Chinese and the Russians couldn't trade with the Iranians either, right? Remember, the P5 is made up of 3 European countries, but also 2 true adversaries of the United States of America. We can stop them from moving forward without us. We have the capacity to control what takes place. Second point is a more important one. I'm not sure this administration, even if they were at the table, if they were sitting there, would cut a deal that made any sense for the United States of America. When they testified, when Secretary Blinken testified in his hearing and others, they said we would do a deal, but it would be longer, stronger, and better than the 2005 JCPOA. There is no chance the Iranians are re-entering these discussions thinking they're going to end up with deeper commitments. Remember, Jordan, many of those commitments from 2015 have already expired, including the capacity for the Iranians to sell weapons systems, to go back into that same deal, which is what the Biden administration has told the world they're prepared to do. Right? We will lift all sanctions if he'll just go back into the old deal. Most of the major provisions have expired, and Iran will be on its path to a nuclear weapon in just a handful of years. This would be tragic for the Abraham Accords, tragic for the region, and really bad for the United States of America.
Yeah, Secretary Pompeo, Wesley Smith. Yeah, the thing I think about too is we go back to this, we have this commitment, we've had a commitment, they're not going to have a nuclear weapon, but how do we address the issue? How are they going to unlearn what they've learned? And the breakout time, the centerpiece of the JCPOA, as flawed as it was that we kept them several years down the road from a breakout time to getting a nuclear weapon. Now experts are saying the breakout time is down to a few months. So how do we go in and really address them unlearning what they've learned and increasing the breakout time? Is that even possible?
Well, you can absolutely increase the breakout time. As for unlearning what they've learned, that's much more difficult to do. But make no mistake about it, it's not a matter of just having the knowledge. There are lots of PhD nuclear scientists that have that knowledge, but the ability to execute, the ability to manufacture, the ability to deliver, the ability to do all the components along the way in delivering a nuclear weapon that would wipe Israel off the face of the earth or to come attack the United States of America is very different from just knowing how to do it. And those things you can stop. The first thing one would want to do is to deny them resources, to put real pressure on the regime. Because in the end, it's true. If this regime decides they want to move towards a nuclear weapon, they may well just go ahead and proceed. But you have to make the cost of doing so enormous that the people of Iran, the amazing people who live in that country, who don't want this theocracy, who don't want these kleptocrats and these crazy religious extremists in charge of their country, will have the capacity and the space to do what they need to do to make sure that Iran doesn't become a nuclear weapon state.
And we've heard from Jake Sullivan and others that the lid's off, and I think some of that, to your point, Secretary Pompeo, you talked about, is that some of these provisions that were the lid were already expiring anyway. So as this moves forward, is there a way for the United States, it's the sanctions, right? It's the kind of pressure to put on that regime, because and they're not talking that way. The Biden team is not talking at all about sanctions. The question, I think the big question for them is whether or not they're going to unfreeze assets to get back to this deal.
Yes, sadly, they're going to unfreeze assets. You can write it down. You heard it here first or maybe second. In some sense, they've already done that. But when you have a sanctions regime, when you fail to enforce it, it effectively is giving up the sanctions themselves. Today, China is importing massive quantities of crude oil from Iran. That did not happen on our watch. We never had perfection, but we had the number of barrels a day produced by the Iranians and paid in cash to the Iranians at very low levels. Think several 100,000 barrels a day versus several million barrels a day. This administration just hasn't taken that seriously, and I think that has not only provided money and resources to the Ayatollah and this horrible butcher, Ibrahim Raisi, that is now the president of Iran, but it's also made them aware that if they continue down a path towards a nuclear weapon, the United States will fold, simply acknowledge that they're a weapon state, and try to manage the risk from there. That is really dangerous, and I promise you, the Israeli leadership knows this, the Saudi leadership knows this, the Emirati leadership knows this, and some group of them, I am confident, will do all they can to make sure that that Iran never gets a nuclear capability they can deliver.
I want to shift a little bit to China. First on these announcements.